Hello, folks. This is the Reason RX podcast with your co-host Michael and your host
Melanie
in Minnesota. Yes, Michael in Houston and Melanie in Minnesota. So, hope you're enjoying the podcasts, and if you remember, if you could help spread the word, give some 5-star ratings, some rational ratings for this. Spread the word. Send some of the podcast episodes to teachers, parents, teacher organizations, homeschool organizations, schools, so we can help improve American education, improve the education of ourselves. Do it local and do it global. Benefit both. But I hope you're doing that, enjoying it, and got about 19 episodes so far, 18. I guess this is 19th today, not 20th. But and then if you could donate, that would help. We could have better quality speakers and recording equipment and all that stuff. Market the show a little more and all that. That would help. Mm-hmm. Anything to add to that, Melanie?
Well, just change takes listening and hearing good ideas. We need to have them. This is the only way we're going to hear them, is if we have people on who have the right ideas. So, yeah, we need help a little sometimes to make sure we get that. So, and if they appreciate that, if there's a value in this, they should show that. I think
like,
that's
for
a good
example,
idea.
we did a podcast this morning, and just so folks know, it's not some like airy-fairy little thing that doesn't take time. We interviewed someone who took like an hour, but then it took me like, I don't know what I was, an hour or 2 or 3 or 4 preparing for it ahead of time.
Yeah,
and then when we're done, it's taken me like 4 hours to look up stuff on the internet, get together show notes, write up the show notes, write stuff up, research this and that, start posting the stuff on Facebook and LinkedIn. Took like 4 hours, so 4 for that, an hour for recording, and I got to go on Audacity and clean out some noise the best I can and all this other stuff. So, we're talking like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, like 6 to 10 hours doing all this stuff. Hopefully it's a benefit, and, people will help support us in that, because 6 to 10 hours, like, or whatever it is for each episode, it all adds up. And I know if I was like Bill Gates, it wouldn't be so much of a problem, but I'm a starving artist, so.
Yeah, for sure. We are.
Yeah. But
that's good. I think that's the point.
So if you could help, that'd be much appreciated. Spread the word. Excuse me. So today we've got the guest, Dr. Andy Bernstein, a philosopher. What does that have to do with anything? Well, we'll find out. We're going to discuss what education is doing well and what it's not. We got to look in the mirror and take a hard look for ourselves, because I know there's some that aren't, but like most parents and teachers want to do their best for their kids and students. They love what they're doing. They love the children. They want to help them out. That's the point of being a parent or a teacher. So, we need to be self-critical if we're going to do it right. And remember, things we're doing, it's not all our fault. We shouldn't feel guilt for it. Some stuff we're doing, we picked it up in the culture, or someone taught us. We trusted them. We thought it was right. But is it really? So in this episode, we're going to look at, try to be critical, positive, and negative. See what we're doing, the ideas and methods. Look at teaching and education, so we can try to have best practices. Try to have a flourishing life. Make things as good as it can be. So what we got to do is look at, as we talked about in prior episodes, we got to look at the history of ideas, where these things come from. Don't take them for granted, but analyze logically and rationally and criticize and think about where education comes from, where this practice comes from. Is it good? Is this what we really want for our children and our students, that we care so much for and that we're trying so hard for? Not all the methods we have are necessarily going to do what we really want. So some stuff we got to throw out so that we can, as we say, do the best for our students and children. We got to look at the pro and con, and sometimes even we got to actually get philosophic. see about education, how it's defined, and even like what's the nature of man that makes education needed. Why do we even need it? We got to ask questions like that. Especially teachers and philosophers of education and principals. It's important so that they can direct themselves well. So we want to start doing some of that in this episode. Not that we haven't already, but we're going to focus on education and its history in America. Anything to add, Melanie?
No, good. Andy's the person to talk to, Dr. Bernstein. He is the guy to talk to about this. He's done so much research. He's a teacher himself. We'll let him give his bio and his background, but just listen and learn something.
So, Andy, could you go ahead and introduce yourself to folks?
Hi. Well, I'm just, first of all, it's an honor to be on the Mel and Mike show. So, thank you very much. And it's got a snappy name, the Mel and Mike show. It's anyhow, I'm just a kid from Brooklyn that went through the people don't believe me when I tell them that. They hear me speak, they think I grew up in Alabama, but they're wrong. I didn't. Kid from Brooklyn went through.
You're from Brooklyn? I thought you were from Slovenia or something. What?
Yeah, there you go.
What the heck?
Even better. I went through the education, the public school system in Brooklyn, and of course it's euphemism, isn't it? They're really government schools. All private schools are open to the public. They're government schools. I got a PhD in philosophy, graduate school at the University of New York. Published 6 books, dozens of essays. People can go on my website if they want and find out about my books. It's andrewbernstein.net.
And we'll link to it in the show notes. We'll link to your bio, and we'll link to your website and books.
Thank you. And the book I'm working on currently is a book on education. The provisional title is American Education: The Collapse, the Cause, the Cure. Mm-hmm. And that's the title. The title says what the book is all about. People know that the American educational system is in bad shape, that it collapsed, but most of them don't know what the cause is, mm-hmm. and almost nobody knows what the cure is. So there's the focus of my forthcoming book. So I figure that's what you guys wanted to talk about.
Yeah, and it's a hard topic. It's like people have tried different things, and people can think, oh, education to make it great. Whoa, put it on the internet, like Khan. Oh, that's great. Well, sorry, but Khan is just doing maybe he's helping some people and stuff. Maybe there's some good things about him, but regardless, it's still the same stuff that's being done in education, but on video. It's like, I teach, I know the stuff. It's like he's not doing anything revolutionarily different in epistemology where it really needs to happen. It's just the same old stuff in a new format. It's a new package. So that's why it's not really helping. And then one thing I was going to put in the show notes, I remembered when I was thinking about this yesterday, there was actually Barbara Walters special in 1988. It was ABC's Tinley Park High School, 1988, America's Kids, Why They Flunk. I couldn't find it anymore. It's taken down. I searched, but 1988, and there's been others before then, but there was even a big ABC
remember
thing
1983, 5 years before that commission appointed by President Reagan issued its infamous report, A Nation at Risk. And
that's just no. They were wrong. That's just because that's when I graduated. So that's why the nation was at risk.
That's why.
Watch out!
Right. That's what happened. But the baleful conclusion was, if a foreign power had imposed on America the poor educational performance, we would have considered it an act of war. This is a statement from, a presidential commission, and it was 1983. That's, 36 years ago, and it's only gotten worse since. So people have known about this for a long time now. They just don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, in 83, 88, the 88 thing probably came out of the 83 thing, and so people might think, well, Reagan or whatever can dismiss it, but Barbara Walters?
Well, oh, sure, Barbara Walters is a serious intellectual. You can't dismiss her.
But, I mean, I don't think she liked Reagan, did she? They were, probably polar opposites.
Probably not.
Probably not. Regardless, it's an issue we need to deal with and not make it political.
Yeah.
More fundamental.
Well, yeah, even the New York Times and the mouthpieces of the leftist press, they're very clear. The American education system is in bad shape. This is across the aisle. It's across the political spectrum.
So how do we know? So first of all, well, I guess since we're on that, we'll stick to that. But so you say American education is not doing well. Okay, how do you know? Prove it. Give me some evidence. Because doesn't it seem good? I mean, we're getting along. We got big technology. We got Apple. We got Steve Jobs and stuff like that. So what's the real issue? What's the evidence?
Yeah, that's a good question. But one piece of evidence, of course, you look at the international tests and you see, year after year after year, American kids score, near the bottom, math, science, history, on the standardized tests internationally amongst the industrialized countries. This goes on. You could just Google it. There's it's in my essay in the Objective Standard on heroes and villains in American education. Get on my website.
And I'll link to that.
Bernstein.net. Yeah, it's got a lot of that evidence. The standardized tests from industrialized nations. The American kids are almost always near the bottom. That's one piece of evidence. Then you look at the reports from the ETS, the Educational Testing Service, and it says some ungodly 40. I don't remember the exact numbers. It makes your hair stand on end, but it's something like 40% of American adults can't read, train schedule or get the meaning out of a newspaper article, and stuff like that. Semi-illiteracy is rampant in this country. I can just tell you from personal experience as a college professor for many years, and talking to my colleagues who teach across the country. It's a widespread phenomenon. American college students generally don't know the first thing about history, which is not a surprise. 100 years ago, they did away with history in favor of social studies, whatever the hell that means. They teach a little history, not much, and it's unbelievable. American kids, I mean, they've heard of Thomas Jefferson, for example, and they kind of sort of know who he is, but if you ask them anything about the American Revolution, they just don't know. One kid said to me, I don't remember even what to ask her something about the American Revolution. She said in class, I missed school the day they taught. And I said, no, the truth is they didn't teach it.
Yeah.
It's something about the Bill of Rights, and James Madison. So they don't know. None of them. Very few. So we can go on and on with evidence, but there's a very high percentage of American adults who are semi-illiterate. That, I think, is the key piece of evidence.
And then we'll link to some of that in the show notes, like the PISA test results that Andy was talking about, international stuff. People can look that up on their own. And then I got some links, some other places I'll have to dig up, but one thing I could find was an article by Kelly Holland, CNBC.com, 2013. It's entitled "Why Johnny Can't Write and Why Employers Are Mad." And people can look that up too.
Yeah. Yep. And I can attest to that. When I started teaching college philosophy classes in 1979, show how old I am, most of the students couldn't read very well back then. But today, I see the trend line going downwards. There's always a few exceptions who can write, but generally the trend line is downwards. They weren't good 4 years ago, and they're going to be much worse. In fact, it's so bad. Last year, 2018, I had to give up on giving essay tests in college philosophy classes.
Wow.
Give them more paragraph question they can answer in a paragraph, because the overwhelming majority of college kids cannot write college level essays, and it's simply heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's sad. If it's not in a philosophy course, what can you do to write essays? If there's not essays, it's not philosophy.
Yeah, and their reading levels is such that it's just for most. There's always a cop in a class of 25. There might be 4 or 5 students who are really good and who could read primary philosophic sources, but 20 out of 25 are not able to read Aristotle, Plato, or Descartes, or Kant. It just goes over their heads. It's just I have to find more, dumbed down secondary sources for them to read because they just can't handle it.
What about can they deal with someone like the great American philosopher Michael Jackson or the great English philosopher Keith Richards? Can they work with some of that?
There's no.
Like moral philosophy. You can't always
few,
get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need.
Who Keith Richards is.
Lead guitar for the Rolling Stones, yeah.
Yeah, right. They're good kids. You know, overwhelmingly, they're good American kids. You know, they want a successful career. They want a good love life. They want to be happy. They're good kids, and the truth is, they're not failing in school. The schools are failing them.
Yeah,
that's the real truth here.
Yeah, I think that's one excuse some people come up with. It says, "Well, the kids are bad, or it's in the water," but it's kind of an excuse, and partly I think people just don't know the philosophy, and so they can't analyze the methods and see what's really going on. But some people take the methods for granted, like they take the sun rising. Well, that's just the way education's done. But no, that's one thing we want to see here. There's other ways to do things that are better.
Absolutely.
But so let me see. So some of the evidence. So we got that, the PISA results. Some of these articles.
It's the literacy test. Whether you get the info from Educational Testing Service or the U.S. government, the evidence comes in overwhelmingly that there's a high number of American adults who are functionally illiterate. They can't read a drug label. They can't understand a newspaper article. It's terrifying, mm-hmm. and heartbreaking, all rolled up into one.
Yeah, and then I'll have to link to something about SAT scores. I think some people think, well, the standardized scores are going up, so that shows they're getting smarter. But I think there's been great inflation in some of those too. And I'll link to an article, and people can think about it for themselves if I can find it. I know. Yeah,
the tests have been dumbed down. Yeah. from when we were kids.
And then I think in the book Range by David Epstein, he thinks that says that some standardized test scores have been improving. But or there's I think some people say there's more geniuses if things are the way they are. But as people point out, if there are really that many geniuses, then society should be a lot better than it is. It's like we'd see the effect of the geniuses
and
if they were here.
The concept is relational anyway. You know, it's like genius relative to what? You know, if in a society of illiterates, the literate man is a genius.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then I'll link to some other articles about people in businesses who've had trouble with students that come, like new hires that come to their company that can't write. I'm pretty sure I got that saved somewhere. I got a number of articles like that. A number of articles about people discussing how their new hires cannot write, and they got to try to train the kids themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just curious, Andy, before we get too into what's causing this, and all that stuff. Where's this coming from? Just right now, what could a parent do for a child that they don't think is getting quite what they need? And maybe to be a better writer or understand things that they read better. Do you have just a few quick, I'm sure not quick, but ideas
absolutely.
For what people could? Okay.
Absolutely. The key to education is to read fluently. And the good news is it's an easy thing to do. We're the rational animal. We have a human brain. Most of us have a healthy human brain. We're not, brain damaged or anything. And a child could learn to read using the method of phonics at age 4 or 5 in a matter of months. At Hooked on Phonics, the company is very popular because their materials are effective. So you teach. My mom did this, and she was not, some paragon of intellectual ability, but she taught my sisters and I using flashcards. She taught us the alphabet, the sounds of each letters, and what is it? There's 26 letters roughly 43 or 44 sounds in the English language. You could learn that in a matter of weeks, maybe months at the most. And then you could sound that even in an irregular language like English, where 13% of the words are not pronounced the way they're spelled. 87% of the words are. And you could learn to read fluently in a matter of months at age 4 or 5. If mom and dad teach you phonics, whether they use hooked on phonics materials or not, and that opens up the whole world of books to the children. And since phonics is relatively easy compared to the whole word method that professional educators want to use, it's not torture for them. Going to schools where they eschew phonics for whole language or look-say or something like that, they've made reading into this tortuous process that's very painful. The kids hate it. They don't want to read. But phonics is relatively easy. The kids can learn to read quickly, and then the whole world of education is open to them. So that's to me, reading fluently is the foundation of education. Everything else depends on that. And the good news is it's not hard to teach a child to read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a good idea. We'll link to that, Hooked on Phonics, and some other phonics stuff in the show notes.
Yeah.
So reading fluently, and try, if they're struggling with reading, do more of it and use Hooked on Phonics or some form of phonics.
The great Chicago educator, Marva Collins, I'm sure you guys are familiar with her. She was a public school teacher, government school teacher in Chicago, 1970s maybe. I'm probably misremembering some of the details. But she was disgusted with the low expectations they had for, kids, the mostly black kids in the hood. She left her job. She opened up her own school, West Side Prep, I like in her friend's basement or something like that. And if I remember the story correctly, she found a bunch of phonics books that the government schools had thrown out. She took them out of the trash bin, and she used them in her school at West Side Prep. And she used phonics and reading everywhere, in math and science, in every class that she taught. And and the kids came to read fluently. And then she had these young children, elementary school children, reading and understanding, advanced literary materials. West Side Prep was a big success. I think it was President Reagan, or the first Bush, was one of those Republicans, could be misremembering some of the details, wanted her to be Secretary of Education because her methods were so effective. But she wisely chose to stay out of politics and stay at her school. But yeah, phonics, reading across the board at West Side Prep, and those kids became very, very good students.
Yeah, and we'll link to that in the show notes. Like, if you read Marva Collins' Away, it's a really good book. There's a documentary we'll dig up and link to that you can watch about her. And she was teaching elementary school in public schools at first, and from what I remember in the book, she was not treated well. Sometimes she'd come in and find her classroom vandalized. Eventually she couldn't stand it anymore, so she left. And then, was really struggling and just emotionally kind of suffering, something like that, if I remember right. And then was able to scrape up the money to open her own school. It might have been in their own house, maybe not a friend's, maybe their own basement or something.
Yeah, it was something like that. It was very downscale, low budget. But it points out, the government throws millions, maybe billions at the government schools to no effect. It just points out it's not about money. It's about methodology.
Yeah, right. It's not money, it's a method.
Right.
That should be the name of an article. That'd be a great article in a newspaper. It's not the money, it's the method, stupid.
Yeah, exactly. You could throw billions at reading, but if you're using some variation of the whole word method, it's going to fail. Whereas you could have a shoestring budget, teach phonics to the kids, and they'll learn how to read.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I taught my kids when they were very little. They'd sit up in the tub. As soon as they could sit up, I had those little styrofoam letters that would stick around the sides of the tub, and we'd start pointing. And I never taught them the name of the letter; I just taught them what it sounded like. And before you know it, they're putting it, and ball or bat, I guess more rather. But so it was just it was so easy for them. There was never ever any other way I could have imagined they'd learn to read.
Yeah, and these poor kids, and maybe some of the audience doesn't know what the these methods are. So let me just briefly explain. Phonics, of course, is you know the letters, you know the sound of the letters, and then you come to a new word. Let's say even a big word like philanthropy. Let's say, and this may be the first time you've ever seen it, but you know the letters, and you know the ph sound is f, and you sound it out. Philanthropy. Oh, philanthropy. I've heard that word in my life, and here I see it on the page, and they could sound it out. Whereas
I still do stuff
word,
like that nowadays as an adult to read a
yeah,
word.
Me too.
You never seen it.
Too.
Yeah.
I have I had a student once who said to me, "What word?" Oh, avuncular. The word was avuncular. He said he used it in class, and I said, "What does that mean?" And the kid says to me, he says, "You have a PhD in philosophy, and you don't know what avuncular means?" And I said, "Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but getting a PhD doesn't mean you know every word in the language." So the kid has audacity. He says to me, "Look it up." So I looked up the word avuncular after class, and it means uncle-like. It means like an uncle. But I could sound that word out, right? It's was it AVUNCULA? I could sound it out. Avuncular. The first time I see it, I can read it. Whereas, the whole word method, whether it's look, say, or whole language, they don't teach. They not only don't teach the kids to sound out the words, they won't let them sound out the words. They have to memorize the shape of the word, and they introduce, a few hundred words every year. So, through the first few grades, you might be able to remember the shape of a few hundred words.
Yeah.
But try and memorize the shape of every word in the English language. You can't do it. It's tens of thousands.
We don't even do that in geometry. It's like, geez.
They teach the kids to guess. And they struggle to read. They won't even read. Mom and dad could teach them phonics, but the teacher's not allowed to let them sound out the words in class. So,
so Andy, why is that not just immediately laughed out of the classroom? As a teacher, you'd be like, this is, why is that not just completely pitched right as soon as it's not working? And what's going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, but as a preface to the answer, I just want to point out there's still today there's a lot of really good classroom teachers out there who really care about the kids. Michael, I think you mentioned this earlier. Who really care about the kids, who care about the kids' education. They want them to learn. They may smuggle in phonics to teach reading, and they'll smuggle in more history than the social studies curriculum allows, and because they care about the kids' education and they know what works and what doesn't work. The problem is not with the classroom teachers. The problem is with the historian Arthur Bester calls the interlocking directorate, meaning the teachers' colleges or schools of education, like Columbia University Teachers College is one example. The teachers' colleges, the state departments of education, and the federal department of education, the professional educationists, as they're known, they don't want phonics. They haven't wanted phonics for 100 years. This is where the teachers are trained, in the teachers' colleges, and it militates against the use of phonics. They don't want the kids reading effectively. They don't want the kids learning academic subjects. They want all kinds of vocational training and practical skills, like wood shop or metal shop or driver's ed or hygiene or sex ed or whatever, all of which is good practical skills to have, but I think should be done after school by mom and dad or at vocational training, or employers who provide on-the-job training. And I think the school should be the one place in society that focuses on teaching academic subjects, history, literature, mathematics, and science. So the kids and teach phonics and use phonics to teach reading. So the kids have basic cognitive skills. They come out of school thinking and knowing how to think. The educational establishment, the interlocking directorate, as Arthur Bester called it, does not want the kids to read well, and they do not want the kids studying academic subjects generally. So now the reason for that will make your listeners' hair stand on end, but they don't have to take my word for it. You can go look at what John Dewey wrote, and the leading progressive educators 100 years ago, William Hurd Kilpatrick, their intellectual heirs today, They don't hide who they are or what they want, what their educational methods are, and why. They don't hide.
I'll link to it in the show notes. Link to the article, and yeah, people can do your own research. We're not here to tell you what to think. We're here to give you some ideas, and it's all about thinking for yourself. Yeah, don't believe what we say. Look it up. Please do your research, and it'll be in Andy's article. And these names, they're there. Do your own research. Get a group. Go on.
Here's a clue.
Yeah, go on sorry, real quick. Go on what is it? Nextdoor.com and have a study group, or do it at your book club, and then you can discuss this all together. Yeah. So you're not going to do it alone. Hook up and discuss it. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. It's an open secret. Maybe it's not a secret of any kind, open or otherwise, that most educators, most professors, certainly in the field of education, politically are leftists, right? They're socialists, semi-socialists, they're anti-capitalists. And this was true 100 years ago at the time of World War I. The leading progressive educators, and most of them at Columbia University, Teachers College in New York City, John Dewey, William Hurt Kilpatrick, George Counts, people like that, admired the Soviet Union. This is 1920s, when Stalin was in power. They pilgrimaged to the Soviet Union. They were effusive in their praise of the Soviet Union, and their idea of a proper society and of a proper educational system is you educate. Don't forget, that was right at the beginning of IQ tests. That was right when the IQ test had first been developed. You IQ test the kids. You find the kids who are the brightest. You educate them in the academic subjects. You teach them math. You teach them science. You teach them history. You teach them literature. You teach them how to read and write and do basic mathematical calculation. Those are the kids that go to college, and those are society's future leaders. They'll govern in the classroom. They'll govern in the legislature. The rest of us don't need that kind of knowledge. And the progressives asked, what good is knowing Shakespeare's plays or calculus or chemistry or physics, for a plumber, a 20th century American plumber or farmer?
Why should a plumber know physics? Why should a farmer know biology or accounting?
Yeah, why should he know how to think?
Why should a plumber know accounting, right? Why should he know finance? I mean, have his own business or become successful and open a library? No.
Yeah, right. Your derisive attitude is well placed. It's exactly right.
True.
And I'll bet a number of your audience members, listening, know something about the history of philosophy. And this is Plato's ideal. You have the philosopher king, or the educated intellectual elite. They govern in the classroom. They govern in the legislature. The rest of us have to be good at our vocation, effective in our profession, have practical skills, and the government will guide us. We uncritically, do what the government tells us because they're the educated intellectual elite, and we're not. And that's their vision. And the state will take care of us, and we'll all serve the state, and everything will be, society will be fine. It'll be good. It's a paternalistic view. That the state, like a loving father or loving parents, will take care of us. And it's a collectivist view. The individuals don't matter in and of themselves. The state matters, and we exist to serve the state. Not an accident that all these educators today and professors, or most of them, are leftists. They're socialists. They don't support individual rights. They don't support the American founding. They don't support capitalism or the United States. They prefer, Venezuela to America. And that's the same. It's the same ideas from 100 years ago that Dewey and the progressives injected deeply into the American educational establishment that still dominate the schools of education today, militating against phonics and against academic subjects as the core of the curriculum.
Yeah, and that's interesting.
Look, it's no accident. It's no accident American kids score poorly on academic tests. The schools, to a significant degree, don't teach academic subjects.
That's one thing I like to bring up a lot. It's important. People would benefit from taking that into their thinking and their methodology, the fact that philosophy matters. And so
yes, it does.
People, and I bring that up when I'm teaching some stuff, people, it's a cliche in math and physics. When are we ever going to use this? Well, it's not math that they might hate, which they think, or physics. I hate math. Well, no, what you hate is the way it's taught, and you hate Plato for ruining it for you. Because Plato's reaching his hand out, as I say, from thousands of years ago in controlling students, teachers, parents, society. He's making things happen in a certain way. So is Immanuel Kant. So is John Dewey. So this stuff is serious. And if people look into it, then they can start recognizing the ideas when they come up.
Yep.
And the idea of the Philosopher King, that came up in Plato's Republic. And then, so it's Plato's Republic. It's a philosophy thing. And so the kids are acting like this. Well, what are some other things that were influenced, some other governments and societies and people that were influenced by Plato's Republic? Well, let's see, Hitler and the Nazis, Mao, the Russian communists, the people who had Siberia and who killed millions of people, the Chinese who had the Great Leap Forward that killed millions of people. The idea of the Philosopher King and everyone else is just a stupid worker.
Right.
It's right there.
No,
it matters.
You're absolutely right. In the modern world, in the 20th and 21st centuries, they call it the planned economy or the planned society. And again, it's pure Plato, transposed into the modern world. You have the educated intellectual elite run the government. They plan out the whole economy. They socially engineer the status of your society, and the rest of us are good worker ants who do our professions or our vocations effectively, but we don't need much education because we don't have to govern, we don't have to do much thinking, and we obey the government. Well, taken to its most consistent degree, you guys are absolutely right. This is National Socialism or Nazism. This is communism. This is a totalitarian state where the state has total power, life and death power over every individual. And if you don't agree with the state, your life is in grave danger.
And it's so tragic. It's as some people say, I'll just put it this way: religious or not, for the love of God, don't do that to your kids, please.
Yeah.
Let them be free. Even, I saw a movie one time with a butler that was making philosophic statements. That's what we should have.
Yeah.
I had a friend. That's a good point, Michael. Because I had a good friend as a kid in Brooklyn. I'll mention his name because he was a great guy. We're teenagers. Kenny Battaglia, who was a bus mechanic. And he enjoyed being a bus mechanic, and he was making much more money as a bus mechanic than all of them make teaching philosophy. But he had this funny idea that bus mechanics didn't have to be illiterate. So he went to community college and took all these humanities classes, wow, nice, all these liberal arts classes in literature and the arts and all. And then when he graduated from there, he took one course a semester, so it took him about 6 years to graduate, get his associate's degree. But from there, he went to Brooklyn College and took another 6 years to get a bachelor's degree. And again, it was his degree is in liberal studies, and he had this funny idea that what is plumbers, in contrast to Dewey and his ilk, plumbers and bus mechanics should know True. Shakespeare's tragedies. True. And it's very beneficial to their lives to have an education and have those thinking skills that having a good education delivers for you. So absolutely. The elitist view of Plato and Dewey and these guys is just flat wrong. And the reason for that is you're right, Michael, it's very philosophical. We're human beings. We're the rational animal, as Aristotle said. We have a human brain, and we need to develop it. We need to cultivate it. People, I think the single most important book for everybody's education is Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, because she makes very clear that the mind is mankind's instrument of survival, and just like wings are literally wings are for a bird, the mind is for human beings, and we need to educate it. We need to know how to think, just like a bird needs to know how to fly. Our survival depends on it.
So you recommend reading the book to learn about some metaphysics of man and how reason works and how we're a rational animal?
Yeah, except so many of my students and college students generally around the country couldn't read Atlas Shrugged today. They struggle with reading too much. It's heartbreaking. And Dewey and those guys, in their vicious way, in their perfidious way, give them some credit here. They didn't know Ayn Rand was going to come along and write Atlas Shrugged, 40 years later. But they made sure that if any Ayn Rand came along, the kids wouldn't be able to read her.
Then, like, Montessori was like that, too. Very independent, wanted the kids to read. She was about developing a student's rational faculty and independence. She knew that independence was not a contradiction to social behavior. But is that kind of like what you're saying, like Rand would have some of the same ideas about?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Maria Montessori she's a genius in the field of education, and by the way, not for nothing, as they might say in Brooklyn, she strongly supported phonics as the method to teach reading, and supported academic subjects rather than vocational skills or practical, vocational training or practical skills as the essence of education. And Maria Montessori, recognized that each child needs to develop independently. We're not here to serve society. Our life, each kid's life belongs to that kid, and they need to be able to think to guide that life. And she stressed independent cognitive development. And I think I'm no expert on early cognition, but from the little I know about it, I think Maria Montessori's methods are very, very effective for teaching young children.
And then, she wouldn't have them all just do whatever the hell they wanted. She'd have them, like, they were social, they got along, they respected each other in class, so it was independent and social, and there's no contradiction.
Yeah. Melanie, you're something of an expert regarding Montessori education in the early years, aren't you?
I've used it extensively. I read her stuff. I own a basement full of her materials. She's great. What I love so much, one of the things, like a big takeaway for me from reading her, was getting my 3 kids to respect each other. And then that sort of grew into let's respect other people, because respect is a very hard thing, I think, for little kids to kind of grasp that concept. But she did such a good job by just starting to say, like, I'm drawing this picture, this is my work, and other kids have to respect that, and they can't come in and take it, add to it, bother you. You have to actually say, can I look at that? And I mean, just things like that. She identifies and justifies why an individual, even a child, deserves that much respect.
Yeah. Yeah, so, if you're not going to respect an individual, what are you going to respect?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
In the Dewey camp, you don't care about individuals. You care about the group, the class as a whole. It's all,
And one thing that's interesting, and I'll link to this, there's a good documentary about Maria Montessori. I knew she was great as it was, but when I saw this, it was like, oh my God, there's so much more. She's so incredible. And I haven't even read like a complete biography or something, but one thing that's interesting, she was in Italy, and she developed her methods, and along came, who was it?
Mussolini.
Thank you, Mussolini. And at first, Mussolini and all his people thought, hey, this is popular, Montessori classroom, let's start doing it. And so they started spreading, and then they found out, wait they're promoting independence. Freeze, everything was stopped. No more Montessori. She had to like leave the country. She went to India.
Yeah.
And so that's she refused to stay there. Yeah, and compromised.
The fascists had her under state surveillance.
Yeah, that's right. It's an amazing thing
about
her.
Yeah, it is. And you guys are absolutely right. I agree with you. The key takeaway to me was exactly what you said, Mel, that Maria Montessori stressed each child is doing his or her own work, and you can come over, another kid can come and ask that kid, can I help you, can I participate? But you have to respect that kid's right to do his or her own work. Whereas in the progressive schools, founded on the ideas of Dewey and his ilk, one kid could just come over and interrupt another kid doing their work, or if the kid's drawing something, could add marks to that kid's drawing and stuff, and the teachers will permit that and maybe even encourage it.
Yeah.
because you're subordinate to the group, or you're subordinate to other members of the group. Whereas Maria Montessori's method is really about individual rights and respecting the child's right to do his or her own work and develop his or her own independent judgment and thinking. And Maria Montessori, to me, is a great educational genius. And by the way, as I pointed out in my essay, the progressives, this goes back to before World War I, 1911, 1912, when Montessori's ideas were catching on in America, they intellectually assaulted her. William Hurd Kilpatrick, who was the dean of the Teachers College at Columbia University and who considered himself John Dewey's leading student, wrote a book assailing Maria Montessori's method. So the progressives recognized that she was a threat to them, and they took her on like within a year or two of her ideas starting to catch on in the United States. They recognized what a danger she was to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's something we got to think about and be critical about.
If I had a young child today, I would definitely. My daughter went to Montessori school,
cool.
And I would definitely recommend, anybody send their kids to a Montessori school if they can afford it. The education is much better than in the progressive schools or in the government schools.
That segues back to one thing we were talking about earlier about what parents can do. So here's another thing: get some phonics, get hooked on phonics, get the kids to read. Look up what Marva Collins did, but then you can read some Montessori. Some of it, if it's too technical, she's got some philosophy. Maybe you don't want to read that, but she's got Montessori's like methods. There's some books that are more practical. You can do that with your kids, some students. As we say, there's like all this stuff on the internet. You can have like nextdoor.com, have a group, get together with other parents, exchange stuff. Do Montessori with your kids. That's another thing I think that would help a lot besides phonics. It's another thing that parents can really do. Something kind of cheap and practical, and you could do it before the kids start going to school or to some extent while they're going to school.
Yes, and we know from a great deal of research, and not surprisingly, the best schools, whether public or private, government or private, are the ones where there's a great deal of parental involvement. And so, the parents can get involved with the PTA. Like I said, there's still, and you said, Michael, there's still a lot of good classroom teachers who care and who know what works in the classroom and what doesn't. And you can get actively involved in the PTA in your school, in your school district, in your kid's school, and lobby here for phonics to teach reading, for more history rather than the other junk on the social studies curriculum. And so on and so forth.
Some teachers would love that support. Like, you're recognized. It's like, geez, please. Or else parents could get in and give some presentations to the school.
The teachers recognize sometimes parents can be a real pain, but generally the best schools are the ones that have a great deal of parental involvement in their kids' education. Mm-hmm. And, a groundbreaking book that was written for the parents, it's very simple to read, was Rudolf Flesch's book, Why Johnny Can't Read, which was published in 1955. And Flesch was an Austrian who was an immigrant here, and he recognized, in Europe they use phonics almost across the continent, and to the best of my knowledge still do, and they have, they don't have remedial reading problems. And he was shocked when he came to America and realized the terrible remedial reading problems we have. And he did all his research, and it showed that it's only from the time of the early 20th century that Americans had trouble reading. And that was when the educators started to move away from phonics to look-say, or variations on the whole word method. And Flesch's book, Why Johnny Can't Read, demonstrates phonics is the method. The look-say method, or these variations on whole word method, are the reason for the failures to read. The book was written simply. It was written for the parents. It sold millions of copies. It galvanized a lot of parents. They went into the schools, worked with the PTA. They lobbied, and a lot of schools started to readopt phonics in the 1950s and 1960s. And for a good 20 or 30 years, Flesch's book made a difference until the educational establishment, people forgot 20 or 30 years later. Yeah. By the 1980s, the educational establishment brought in whole language, which is a variation on, the whole word method. And we started,
different name for the same thing.
Exactly. And in California, they did it. And by the mid-1990s, it's not that long ago, the whole language method was such a disaster that California reading levels amongst elementary school students had sunk to the same level as Mississippi. They were tied for 49th and 50th, the worst reading levels in the country.
That's a nice
and they
experiment.
Yeah, it was a disastrous experiment, of social engineering, and hurt I don't know how many thousands of children. And finally, the parents were the ones who were up in arms, and California had to go back to using some version of phonics in order to reinvigorate reading levels. But anyway, Fletcher's book made a difference for a good 20 or 30 years, and galvanized the parents, and it showed the kind of power the parents have. They went into the schools, and they got a number of schools to reintroduce phonics, and a number of the educational publishers, to some of the leading publishing houses, to reintroduce phonics into the textbooks to teach reading, and to do away, at least in part, with the abysmal Dick and Jane, look-say readers, the C-spot run, that kind of inane stuff where you learn a couple hundred words per year, and that's all. The publishers started to bring back phonics in the reading textbook. So Fletcher's book made a difference, and it showed that because the parents, he targeted the parents. I'm writing my book for the parents, and to reach the parents, and the parents have some power. They showed they have some power.
And people should. A good idea is to look at Marva Collins' Way. That's related to what you're saying. Good segue. For one thing, it's an accessible book. It's a nice story. It's a true story, but kind of like a fiction story, the way it reads, just with the excitement and everything.
Book.
And
it's a great book. You're right.
She does that too, having kids read harder stuff. It's one thing why she was hated. She was having her kids read Shakespeare. It's like,
right.
Okay, they don't get it all, right? They'll get more when they're older. They can read it again, but you read selections and the language is so great. That helps train them in language, helps train their brain in ways that's going to have a beneficial effect later in life. They need that. They need great writing to change their brain and to learn what great writing's like so that they can reproduce it in the future. They need those models.
Right. That's, and if we look at American history, the educational levels in this country were very high, maybe the highest in the world prior to the early 20th century when Dewey and the ideas of the progressives started to take over the educational establishment. I mean, for example, the essays of the Federalist, Hamilton, Madison, John Jay, written in support of a constitution for the nascent republic. Those were large. That's sophisticated political theory. I don't think my college students could read the Federalist today. But those were largely newspaper editorials written for and read by every man. And there's a whole bunch of evidence like that showing how high the literacy levels were in this country. But maybe the best example were the McGuffey readers. That I think Thomas Sowell points out, I think it was from 1836 when they debuted to roughly 1920, something like that, less than 100 years. They sold 120 million copies, largely in the United States. The American population was not that large back then. This was the book used to teach American kids, give them their basic education, and it's unbelievable. McGuffey was using excerpts from Nathaniel Hawthorne in the 4th grade reader, excerpts from William Shakespeare in the 5th grade reader. What really popped my eyeballs was the term benighted in the 3rd grade reader. I mean, my college kids don't know that benighted means ignorance. I could ask them, what does benighted mean, and even underscore and the NIGHT in the midst of it, and they don't know it means ignorant. But he was using it in 3rd grade readers. This was the kind of literacy levels that were rampant in America back then. It really shows that kids can learn sophisticated material if you start with phonics as the method of teaching reading, And you're absolutely right, Michael. Expose kids to great literature as one means of teaching them how to write. You know, that you read great literature and your mind you think about it. Your reading comprehension is there. Your mind absorbs it. You learn. You know, we're not going to be Hawthorne or Shakespeare, most of us, although some people might be. But we'll learn how to write legible sentences, unlike my poor college kids who rarely can do so.
And, you know, then people really try to get it and appreciate it in yourself and see what it's done in your life, and then you'll be able to teach it better. As I say sometimes, like, if you make it interesting, you don't got to make it fun. Sometimes make stuff fun, but that's one thing I think that's going on nowadays, where teachers are trying so hard to get the kids interested. Let's make it fun. Let's make it fun. Okay, sometimes, but if you make it interesting, it doesn't have to be fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, I mean, it was Maria Montessori, wasn't it, whose idea was basically, you know, you really crank in school for X number of hours. You really work at it. And if I remember correctly, no homework. And then you go out and you can spend the rest of the day playing or doing whatever kids want to do. And if you crank for 4 or 5 hours, you know, with breaks here and there, you know, let's say you have an hour in reading and an hour on math and an hour in science and an hour in history, and you with breaks in between. In 5 hours, you could really have learned a great deal of material, and then you're done. The kids are motivated, you know, and say, by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll be done. We'll have no homework. We'll have the whole rest of the day to go play. Yeah, I think that's a very good way to approach, you know, childhood education.
Yeah, and then they have plenty of time to read other stuff. It's not like you're forcing them to read Hawthorne all the time. They read a little bit in school, and then they still have time also to read stuff that they want to. It's not like a contradiction. It's not one or the other. It's both.
Right. Yeah, and there's the one exception. I mean, the literature class, you'd have to have. We're having Macbeth. We're starting Macbeth on November 13th. You know, so here's the syllabus on September 1st. You know, you got to have it read by that time. So there would be some work done, you know, after school. But that would be it. Great literature. To other than that, you know, once we're done, like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we're done for the day. We can go play baseball or go swimming or go do ballet or learn vocational skills, work with my father or uncle on working on auto mechanics and stuff. Whatever it is that the kids like.
And run around in the woods like Darwin, or run around in the farm like Isaac Newton.
Yeah, or study ballet like Melanie's adorable daughter, Kira.
So what are kids doing in school today? What is going on if they're not able in a 7 or whatever amount of hours a day they have?
Let me interrupt 1 second. And another thing parents can do, we were talking about the great literature and how it affects your brain. The Institute for Excellence in Writing, IEW, knows about that. I'll put a link in the show notes, and they talk about how Ben Franklin learned to write, and so they model some stuff on that. So what Ben Franklin did, and you can have your kids do, slowly with small things developing through high school. You got to take it step by step, piece by piece. It's better to go too slow than too fast, because you want to really develop competence and knowledge and not memorize a bunch of stuff or make the kids hate it. But Ben Franklin would look at a great piece of writing, look at some key words, and then try to write them himself with those words. And then he'd do some stuff like he'd read it, maybe take some notes, and then try to write it himself. And he said sometimes he'd write it and he would do some stuff better, Yeah,
I was going to say.
Sure.
So you take something that's already there and then write it yourself in your own words, things like that. And that's what he did to make himself a better writer.
That's a very good method from a guy who was a genius in those kind of things. Practical principles to make our lives better in one form or another.
And that's what parents can do, and then they can help at the same time make themselves better writers, educate themselves.
Yeah, that's true. Melanie, in answer to your question, that's a really good question. Before I finish writing my book, I'm going to have to talk to a lot of my college students, as well as my daughter, who's still in high school, and find out what do they actually do all day. I mean, in some cases, they are studying academic subjects. But remember something. Today, 2019, in most states in the United States, you only need to take 2 years of math to graduate high school. Most high school kids take a biology class, but I think only like 50% take a chemistry course, and there's a handful who take, biology, chemistry, and physics, and so on. Social studies is whatever they teach there is very little. Some history, very little. So, what are they actually doing? There's more and more practical kind of courses. They take courses in hygiene. They take courses in driver's ed. They take courses in sex ed. They have vocational skills. Like wood shop, metal shop, things like that. They're spending time on subjects that are beneficial, without a doubt. I mean, driver's ed is a good thing. Hygiene is a good thing, and so on. Sex ed is a good thing. But, excuse me, I think, like I said before, that should be taught by parents, done after school. Kid can go to vocational, school in the afternoon, evenings, or summer, things like that, to learn those things. The school should be focused rigorously, I think, on academic subjects. It should be the one place in society that focuses on teaching academic subjects, and they only do it partially. And in Europe, we have to acknowledge, as much as I generally dislike Europe, the Europeans do this better. They're not as influenced by Dewey and the progressives as American educators are. They use phonics to teach reading. They focus much more on academic subjects in the schools than American schools do, and that's the fundamental reason why kids from European countries score higher on academic tests than American kids do. So it's not that the American schools, in answer to your question, it's not that the American schools don't teach academic subjects. They do. And like I said, there's a lot of good classroom teachers, and some American kids get a really good education, go to Princeton, places like that. It's that they don't teach it enough. They've diluted it. They've watered it down with a lot of practical skills and vocational training. And, of course, because they eschew phonics, for some variation on the whole word method, the kids struggle to read, and they've necessarily had to dumb down the literature reading lists. And Michael, I have in my SAU in Texas, I know they I found this information. It was something like 1920 or in the early 20s, ninth grade Texas statewide reading list. The reading levels were, I forget, something like eighth grade to 12 something. Whereas today, less than 100 years later, the high school reading list for ninth grade, state of Texas, the grade levels are like 4. I don't remember the exact numbers. It's like 4.5 to, well, maybe it's 6.5 to 8.7 or something like that. It's not even close. Yeah. The reading list, ninth grade, statewide Texas public schools 100 years ago was substantially higher.
Yeah, and some people might say that's just because it was the elite being educated, but in some stuff I've read, cowboys going across the West, families going across the West, they got books with them. There's, you read Louis L'Amour in his Westerns, a lot of these cowboys are readers. They have some book, and they even do the way you should. They have a book that they read over and over and over. That's how you really get to know it and understand it, and not just have a passing acquaintance with it.
Right, and that's why the McGuffey readers are a good point. And a lot of your listeners probably know who Thomas Sowell is, the economist who's written dozens of books, and I'm a big admirer. And Professor Sowell's book Inside American Education, he points out that regarding the charge of elitism, that the McGuffey readers sold like 120 million copies in a country with a much smaller population than today. And this was the book used not for the wealthy elite in the cities, but this was the book used to teach American kids to read, to write, the 3 R's and so forth. Across the country, on the frontier, in the Great Plains, children of farmers who were taught by their mothers, when dad was out, plowing the North 40, and stuff. And, of course, use phonics and very high literacy levels in the McGuffey readers, and the kids learn. They learn whether they were in the cities or on the farms or in small towns and villages.
Was it I think it's from him that I heard about a high school. Was it Thurgood Marshall High School or something like that? They used to be so good and then got like kind of intellectually destroyed. I think there were some like great people that came out of that school, if that's what it was called. I forget which one. I'll have to look that up. You know, Andy?
No, I don't know offhand. It could be in one of Thomas Sowell's books. I'm not sure.
Maybe I'm thinking Thurgood Marshall is one of the people that came out of it, but I think it might have been an inner city school or something. But just had high standards, produced a lot of successful people.
Yeah, and Thurgood Marshall, of course, was a brilliant lawyer who went on to become a U.S. Supreme Court justice.
Mm-hmm. But,
Andy, just to play devil's advocate a little bit here, quick, but don't we kind of see the teachers, or at least the educational system, trying to always tweak and do it a little bit better? I mean, they keep coming up with a new name for it. Like I think recently, Common Core sounds.
Right.
So I mean, gee, aren't they making some efforts to always keep improving? And they, what about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what they tell us. That's what they would have us believe. The truth is something, unfortunately, that's much uglier. And let's use Common Core as an example, because that's been in the news over the last, 10 or 15 years.
And so here, again, remember, we got to be critical. Look at the pros and cons. This is a matter of our children and our students. It's not just what we want. We got to be serious about the people that are under our care and that we love. So this is a serious issue, whether or not it's good.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, it's absolutely a serious issue. But the problem, I mean, is the main problem with Common Core is that it delivers, if put into practice, it would deliver 100% control over the U.S. curriculum, public or private schools, to the federal Department of Education. That is, to a huge part of the interlocking directorate that's responsible for the problem in the first place. Mm-hmm. So, in my essay, I point for USA Today on this. I pointed out that's like delivering, more lethal germs to an area ravaged by epidemic. The last thing you want is the federal Department of Education to control the curriculum for American schooling.
But aren't they just trying to raise the standards and have like common high standards that are really good? Isn't that like something that all independent teachers are going to be, like? They want to be like an independent, strong, rational teacher is going to want to be told what to do and how to do it, and it's going to raise up the standards for like other teachers.
This is a key. They are the federal Department of Education. It is a key component of the educational establishment, which for 100 years has not fun. I shouldn't live. They've militated against phonics to teach reading, against academic subjects in favor of vocational training. The more power you to deliver to them, the federal Department of Education, the less we're going to see phonics used in the school, the less we're going to see academic subjects taught to the kids. They're the last organization you'd want teaching your kid. I mean, I'm as secular as anybody could be, but I'd rather have my kid taught in a Catholic school or a Jewish yeshiva or a Protestant school, and taught creationism, than have the federal Department of Education control curriculum for the entire American school system.
Oh, so you think it might be something like in Italy with Maria Montessori, like when they were trying to control education there, and she couldn't exist in that society, in that environment. So that kind of a mind couldn't operate there, and that kind of system of great independent rational thought couldn't work. Is that like?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Melanie Hoffman Katragada would not then have the right to decide what curriculum to teach her children, because it would have to conform to the federal guidelines laid down by the Department of Education. If they have the power to determine what the curriculum is going to be for all schools in this country, public, private, or own school. So anybody who goes against the Department of Education in that case is going to be fighting the federal bureaucracy, and good luck with that. The extreme of it, I don't think it's reached this in America yet, but it has in parts of Europe. In Germany, they'll take your kids away from you if you homeschool them. They have to go to the government schools. They have to comply to government standards. So yeah, the independent thinkers, they would love these mentalities that we're talking about. The educational establishment influenced by Dewey and the progressives, they would love nothing better than to squash Montessori schools, to eliminate homeschooling and so forth, and make everybody conform to federal guidelines. So yeah, it's pure Plato.
So do you
the
think
government will take care of us?
Do you think
All
Montessori?
we have to do is obey.
Do you think someone like Montessori could ever come into being and develop her system in a society like that, where something like Common Core is the way everyone has to be? Would that be possible?
No, they wouldn't let it. How schools would have to conform to the federal program. And if we keep moving in that direction, as we are, whether it's Trump and the Republicans or Bernie Sanders and the Democrats, if we keep moving in that direction where the government controls, more and more of our lives, then gradually we will approach Mussolini and the fascists in Italy, where they had Maria Montessori and her son under state surveillance, where they like you guys said, they went from initial enthusiasm about Montessori schools to extreme skepticism because she was teaching the kids to think independently, and she was teaching them the link between education and peace rather than the aggressive, militaristic attitudes of the fascists. So yeah, I mean, when the government moves more and more and more towards dictatorial control of our lives, it necessarily and preeminently wants to control the educational system. And Maria Montessori, she's lucky she was only exiled rather than executed.
Yeah, and it was good for us too. Jeez, I'm glad she made it. God.
Yeah, me too.
Wow. And then, one thing people can consider if you want to think, okay, well, it's Common Core, and if Maria came along, then hey, they'd embrace her ideas and they'd see how she's right. But if you read the book, The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz, I think that's a good book that shows how, in one area, and you can pick others, it's not like it's only there. It's just a concretized principle, just one example of a principle, where she discusses how government and some pseudoscientists get into positions of power, and they decide certain things about fat, and fat's bad, and they just, instead of admitting they're wrong, they just trench and retrench and retrench. And, think about it. Are they going to ever... What is it going to take for them to admit that they were wrong about diet, and then think about the consequences? That would mean that they've misled and injured and made unhealthy and killed millions of people. Are they really going to do that?
It's the same thing about education. What would they have to happen to them to admit that they were wrong and have crippled millions of minds over the past century?
Yeah.
That's a fascinating question in political philosophy, and I think the answer is this: that if...
Whoa, is he still there? I still see his picture. I think he might have cut off.
You can't hear me. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I don't know. We lost the call, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I don't
Technical
either.
difficulties, NSA, NEA, someone trying to take us down.
The NEA, definitely. They're more dangerous than the NSA. But let me answer your question real quick. If the government had the ideas of the American founders, James Madison, for example, writing in the Bill of Rights, then they wouldn't be trying to ram down our throats one diet. They wouldn't be in the dietary business. They would recognize the right of individuals to study the field of dietetics and nutrition and decide for themselves what they should eat or what they should have their children eat. And similarly in education, they would respect the rights of individuals to start different schools with diverse methods. Some would teach evolution, some would teach creationism, some would teach both. The government would be less safe, fair, would keep its hands off and respect the rights of individuals to decide for themselves what to teach or what their children should study, and so on. The very fact that they want to control these fields, nutrition and education, shows that they don't respect individual rights. They don't respect the mind of individuals to choose for themselves. They want to control that. Now, why do they want to do that? they want power. For one thing, it goes back to that paternalistic society model. They believe that they know best. They can guide our lives better than you or I can guide our own lives, and they're not going to give up that kind of power. So they're not going to relate. They're not going to admit that they were wrong. That would require then that they abdicate power. That paternalistic model does not permit it. They know best, and they're going to guide our lives.
And then I'll put a link to that if people aren't sure about the food thing. They think, oh, well, food, they're not really in it. Big deal. Well, the Big Fat Surprise shows it. It talks about how they're influential in determining the dietary guidelines and what people eat nowadays and what's grown and everything. It's just all over the place. But then, who was it? The FDA, I think it is, in a court case, I think they said that in this case that you have no fundamental right to choose the foods you eat.
Good. Well, that says it all, doesn't it?
I'll link to it.
Yeah. That says it all. Yeah. And of course, the Common Core is a movement towards that, in that direction, education, that you have no right to decide what to teach your children or what your children should learn. The wise men and women who run the federal government know best, and their guidelines will be laid down, and we have to follow them.
Yeah, and I don't think that's good for the children. Like, if we really love our students and love the children, we want what's best for them, then we need to have like the best diet and not eat what we're told to eat by some big organization that just is full of power lust.
Yeah. The USDA recommends it. The U.S. Department of Agriculture recommends a diet that unfortunately I like, which is high carb, but we know, increasingly the research shows it's not proper nutrition. It just makes us much fatter than we otherwise would be. And the U.S. Department of Education recommends educational guidelines that stunt the mind. No phonics, fewer academic subjects. One harms the body, the other one stunts the mind. Wow. I mean, George Washington and the American founders must be spinning in their graves at what the U.S. government has become.
And one thing interesting, like I'll throw in a little extra for folks in regard to the diet thing. In listening to a podcast recently, it might have been Nina Teicholz who wrote that book. I think she mentioned a study, and I looked it up. At Bellevue Hospital in Washington, there were two people who ate nothing but meat for 1 year, and they were healthy. It's a report. It's written up, and of course, by meat they don't mean like what a lot of people nowadays mean, like lean chicken or whatever. It's like the way it should be. It was like different meats. They'd eat like different organs of the cow and animals, like liver, kidney, brain, stuff like that, where you get all these different nutrients. I mean, I can't do that. I wish I could eat the organs because they're so healthy, but like a lot of folks out there, they probably wouldn't want to either. It probably seems disgusting because we didn't grow up on it, but there are ways around it. Like I take these supplements that are like a little capsule of brain or a little capsule of organs, and that way I don't taste it, but I'm still getting the nutrients. Like if people want a superfood, it's not vegetables. Superfoods eat the liver. There's a superfood, or you want a healthy brain. Everything that the brain needs is in a brain. Eat some like brain. But that's what these people did, and they were studied by two doctors, and they knew their stuff, and they were like mentally sharp at the end of the year, and no vitamin deficiencies, and strong, and they were just fine. But I mean, I wouldn't do all meat diet, carnivore thing. If some people want, fine. I like eating my vegetables too, but that's just to show that the whole point is. A lot of the dietary recommendations are not really correct, and some of the conventional ideas people have are not correct either.
No, that's absolutely right. And here's why several reasons why it's so important to have a free society that respects and protects individual rights. Because then research is done, independent thinkers, Maria Montessori in the field of education, or Margaret Collins in education, or the researchers you're talking about, Michael, in the field of nutrition. Independent research is done. The evidence is presented. The people who are thinkers in society, especially if we teach them to think using phonics and so forth, can read the evidence, judge for themselves what method of education is best, what diet is best, and you respect the rights of individuals, and you get all this research done by independent minds, and our knowledge progresses in every field, whether it's nutrition or education or any other field.
And then it's not like the poor aren't going to do it. Like, sometimes people say, well, the rich will do it and the poor won't. Well, wrong. Like, sorry, but I'm not going to say that poor mothers and fathers don't love their kids, don't care about them, or too stupid to figure out that education's important. They know diet's important. They know education is important. They will do it. It's proven through centuries of history. It's proven in India. It's proven in different countries. It's proven in this country if you just let them do it. But they're going to, if you let them be more free, and they could have a dang garden in their yard or something, so they could have healthier vegetables and have more time to do that, they would. I
always get this argument from people on this that, the poor, have to take their kids to McDonald's because it's cheaper than in a good restaurant, and so that's the food that the poor kids get. And I point out to them, you're blanking out the whole realm of the most nutritious and inexpensive way to feed your children, and that is not to go to a restaurant at all, but to go to an American supermarket, which is a cornucopia of foodstuffs, buy the food in the supermarket, and prepare it at home, which is cheaper than any restaurant, including McDonald's. And poor families, your poor mothers have been doing this. You're right, Michael. Poor families and poor mothers have been doing this for centuries, to feed their children. Don't take them to McDonald's except maybe once a week as a treat. They buy food in the supermarket and cook it at home. And that food's generally more nutritious, and it's cheaper. So, people just often just push aside the facts of reality that clash with their conclusion.
Yeah, or like chickens. Like, if there weren't some of the stupid regulations we have in the cities or subdivisions, people could have chickens, and therefore they have eggs and meat. Or
good point.
Let them grow a dang garden. There's or if people want, why are there all this stupid grass around? If people want, okay, if they want to feed the poor, have subdivisions where you can have a damn garden, and then if you want to really donate, get the vegetables and give them to the poor, or let them grow them themselves. Teach them to garden. Like Montessori did that. She knew gardening was important. There's so many ways that things can be done better. We got to think about, that's why holistic thinking is important. Look at everything and not just this one little thing in isolation. Because education relates to diet relates to education. You need sleep, you need diet to get a better education. Then when you have a better education, you understand the science behind these more and how to grow a garden better.
Here's where the basic 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, are so important. These are basic thinking skills. And, if the schools focused on those, which I think they should, and they used to, but haven't for the past 100 years, people could be trained to think better and more clearly. And I think that would carry over into all of these other fields, including, learning how to have a vegetable garden, learning, proper nutrition, so you can teach, you can feed your kids inexpensively and nutritiously and so on. But it all goes back to Ayn Rand's point here that, the mind is mankind's instrument of survival. Just like mother birds have to teach their fledglings how to fly, and mother cats teach their cubs how to hunt, and so on. Human parents need to teach our children how to think, and establish schools that teach our children how to think. And with that basic survival skill of thinking, then that applies to every practical field we want to mention, from nutrition, to plumbing, to farming, to auto mechanics. Thinking people can learn all these practical skills and vocational skills readily.
That's an interesting point. We usually don't hear about Ayn Rand saying that reason is a tool of survival. Oh, and and so Montessori was like that. Did Rand know about Montessori?
Yeah, Ayn Rand was a big advocate of Maria Montessori's methods. It's in all of her periodicals and her nonfiction. There's any number of essays, celebrating Maria Montessori's method.
Oh, cool. So she actually read Montessori and studied it and liked it and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very, very, very strongly. And a brilliant essay, The Comprachicos, which just makes your hair stand on end, shows the horrors of the progressive approach. And there's any number of essays in her periodicals that celebrate Maria Montessori's approach, and Marva Collins, by the way. There's essays, praising Marva Collins's teachings as well.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, because usually you don't hear that a lot. Usually it's like what Rand is a statist and eats babies and stuff like that. But
right.
She likes Montessori and Marva Collins and
and educators who train the mind rather than teach the kids to conform to the group and obey the state.
Huh. Yeah. Where was she from?
Ayn Rand?
Mm-hmm.
Well, she was born in Russia, in St. Petersburg in 1905, and was educated under the Soviets. That's astonishing, isn't it? That Ayn Rand received her college training under the Soviets. And anyway, defected from the Soviet Union in 1926 when she was 21 to come to the country whose original founding principle she loved, the United States of America. And isn't it interesting? It took an immigrant and from a communist totalitarian state to be the person who most appreciated the principle of individual rights, the person maybe in all of human history who most understood and appreciated and most brilliantly defended the principle of individual rights. It makes sense. We grow up, with the benefits of it, and to a significant degree we take it for granted. Somebody goes up under the communists and was as brilliant as Ayn Rand was. It makes sense that she would yearn for it, she would pine for it, she would think about it, she wouldn't take it for granted, she would study it, understand it, and then defend it brilliantly.
That's interesting, because then she's like Montessori. So Montessori was in Italy, then under Mussolini had to leave, and she went to India not because for the same reason, I think, that it was her ideal place.
Nobody goes to India seeking freedom.
Yeah, there were some people there that I think that were starting a school. I think that's why she went. I think she was going to stay just for a little while, but ended up staying for a long time because of the war and because of these people.
The British interned her in a camp during the war. She was an Italian national, so she was a national of an enemy.
Huh. So there are some similarities between them that are interesting. Rand and Montessori.
Yeah. Yeah, they both. Rand grew up under a totalitarian state, and Maria Montessori had to deal with the totalitarian state when she was trying to establish her schools. Had to flee. They both fled. They both fled from totalitarianism.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And both of them prized independent cognition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But
how are we doing on time, by the way? I know we've been going for a while.
Yeah, about an hour and a half minus the time where you were lost.
Yeah, when the NEA tried to disrupt us.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, we probably ought to be wrapping up a little bit. I need to go have dinner anyway. Done a good hour and a half. It's probably good for people. Then we can do a part 2 some other time, but
this has been fun. This has been fun to be on the Mel and Mike show. So, anytime you want to reprise it, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, because so far we've talked about, we know we're looking at some pros and cons because we want to do what's, as parents and teachers, we love our kids. We want to do what's best for them. So we started to look at the evidence of, the good and the bad about American education. And the good, we want to keep going. We can recognize that. Some things we need to look at are the cons, what we're doing wrong, the bad. So we looked at some evidence for those things, saw how they were important. We can flesh out more about their development in history, talk more about Dewey. But I think we did a good job of covering the evidence from a long time ago and more recently. And people can read your article, as we said, to get some names, do more research, and
Yeah, my article, Heroes and Villains in American Education, is available for free on my website at andrewbernstein.net. It's not behind the paywall, so
Good.
And I want to publicly thank Craig Biddle at the Objective Standard, because that essay was published in TOS and he has the rights to it, and he has it behind a paywall at TOS website, because it's part of the way they make money and stay in business. And he gave me permission to put it up on the on my website for free. So I want to thank him publicly for that, and get the word out, because like we said before, many people know the American educational system is in bad shape, but few know the reason why, and even fewer know the cure for it. So
we looked at more evidence of what's going on now, what's going on decades ago, how to really tell, because some people think, well, education's bad, but it's fine with my kid, or my school, but we got to really be honest and look and do what's best for our kids to make the most for them. Because we're getting along and things are cool and we're kind of happy, but we want the best for them. And
and we should give some praise to the parents. Again, it was the parents, largely religious. Many of them were devout Christians, and I don't agree with the religious approach. But I give them credit. In every state in the country now, homeschooling is legal, and it was the parents who fought for it, and often very religious parents. And that's one of the good things in American education today is, some parents claim to homeschool their kids and then neglect them. That's true. It's tragically true. But over and over and over again, in most cases, homeschooling parents do a good job teaching their kids, and their kids do well, on the standardized tests, and they have basic thinking skills, reading, writing, and basic mathematical calculation. So that homeschooling is legal in this country is a great thing. Let's hear it from America. It's still a free country. Parents can educate their children at home, which Common Core, of course, would make them conform to federal guidelines. But they can still teach their kids at home, which in a lot of countries around the world they can't do, as that infamous case in Germany where the parents, the children were taken away from the parents and by the state because the parents were not that the parents weren't educating them; they were doing a very good job educating them. Is that they were educating them at home rather than sending them to school. So in America, it's horrible. But in America, we're still free to homeschool, and generally homeschooling parents do, like Melanie, do a very good job. I've witnessed her in action. I know how good she is with the kids, educating them, and that's a great positive. And a lot of parents may not have the time to do that, but some parents do, and that's one way to get around the problems of the government schools is to teach the kids at home. It's not that hard, especially once they learn to read by use of phonics. So there are some hopeful signs in American education. Homeschooling definitely one of them.
Yeah, it's good that some of the people from decades ago, some of these parents were willing to do what's best for their kids and deal with being ostracized and demonized. And look where we are now. So hopefully in the future, it's like some people that this is done to, and hopefully we'll have movies made of them. They'll see the heroic struggle. Because unfortunately, it's like homeschooling. Oh, they can't socialize, or they're the kids are abused and they're so stupid. But, I have tutored. I'm a tutor and teacher. I've tutored some homeschool kids. There's some of them in particular. I'll just think of two, not to ignore or exclude the others, but these two brothers I worked with, they were some of the nicest kids, most social and talkative I've ever met in my life. You cannot tell me they're not nice. You cannot tell me they're asocial, because I know these kids and I will defend them too. I care about them. They are of value to me. They are great kids, and I'm not going to let them be insulted like that. They're good kids.
A few years ago, I don't remember.
I just got
you're passionate. You're passionate about this. That's why you guys have the Mel and Mike show, But I read this article in a major news magazine. I don't remember if it was Time or whoever it was, part of the leftist, media, and they acknowledged that the homeschool kids did well academically. And the thing they're worried about was, their social lives, were the kids sufficiently social. Now think about just the mistake here. The one premise here is the only place where kids are going to meet other kids and be able to socialize with other kids is in school. Yeah. Now, I mean, for me, having grown up in Brooklyn, there were more kids on my parents' block, in Brooklyn than there were in most schools. So it wasn't any problem.
Second cousins, third cousins.
Yeah, it wasn't any problem to meet kids. Now, granted, and this is true in most cities and large towns, and maybe even in small towns and villages. There's certainly kids in the neighborhood or in the town or village. But even for kids who are homeschooled, let's say rurally, on a ranch or farm, homeschooling parents who are so conscientious in teaching their kids overwhelmingly form networks with other homeschooling parents, and they introduce their kids to other homeschooling kids, not to mention that there's 100 options across the country, whether you get your kid is interested in Little League Baseball or the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts, or they live on a farm but 6 miles away in the town. So, there's a teacher who teaches ballet, and your daughter, loves ballet, and like Kira does, and she goes to to the ballet class with other kids. I mean, it's not that hard in the United States, even in rural areas, for the parents to introduce their kids to other kids. It's really not that difficult.
Yeah, and like Drew and Dylan, the two kids, they, heck, they're like, did dance class. They were both Eagle Scouts. I don't remember some other stuff they did. They played some sports, but all this stuff all over the place. Or and I work with Melanie's kids too, teaching them science. Been going over a year and doing some fitness stuff, but
it's not that hard. Not that hard to find other
Melanie's kids are nice. Yeah. What do they do, Melanie?
Oh, yeah, Melanie's.
What do you have your homeschool kids do socially? What?
A million things. I always tell people when they say to me, "Oh, do your kids have friends?" They ask, no, they're kept in the basement. The door is locked, so they can't get out. I mean, it's the weirdest questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that they realize that you live in the Twin Cities, which is a major city, and there's like lots of kids there. It's not hard. Then you're not living on a ranch, in rural Nevada, where it might be harder to find other kids, but even then it's not really all that difficult. But anyway, a key point that we need to discuss here is children learn how. Oh, I see a black cat.
Yeah, it's my kitty.
The small bear. Sorry, Andy, that's a bear.
I saw a video online today of this guy in Colorado who woke up one morning, looked out his window, and he had 4 mountain lions on his back porch. So it's like, God, and mountain lions are dangerous.
I don't know, not so much as you think. That's more.
Oh, is that right?
Myth, yeah.
Oh, okay, well, thank you for letting me know that,
I've read about it.
But
yeah.
But anyway, the point that was making.
I mean, they can be dangerous, but the risk is lower than people think. But
that's good to know. But anyway, that's good to know. But people, children learn how to be social with other human beings overwhelmingly from mom and dad, not from other kids.
Yeah.
So their mom and dad, they spend more time with mom and dad rather than in the government schools, which are often rowdy, places. There's more time with mom and dad to learn how to interact in a civilized way. But the key point is regarding a social life and friends. All kids want to have friends, and like I said, I'll say it again. If you grow up in the United States, it's not that hard for parents to homeschooling parents to find other kids for their friends to interact with, whether they're in the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or Little League Baseball or studying martial arts. At the school in town, the martial arts school, the karate school in town, and so on and so forth. There's 100 ways to more than 100 ways to meet other people, and not just online on social media, although there's that too, but to meet them in person.
Yeah. So what do your kids do, Melanie? Like ballet? Not all of them. The boys don't do ballet, but Kira does.
They did. Everybody did ballet, and cool. Leo and Jack did that I think Leo did it for 4 or 5 years, and Jack about that long, and then Kira's been at it now 10 years almost.
Well, there's got to be some male ballet dancers, otherwise ballet is going to die.
Yeah.
But they're all in karate. They all do mostly soccer. Leo doesn't right now. Leo's in a film club, so he's studying filmmaking. He's made his own first movie.
With other
he's
people.
written a couple scripts.
With other people, right?
Yeah, with other people. I mean,
Melanie's kids are superstars.
Well, I think they have real potential to be. I mean, they're showing great signs of individual thought, and that's important, I think. And as far as getting a good education, you need to still think for yourself. You can't just take it in and accept it. Yeah. There's none of that here. There's no dogmatic teaching whatsoever. But what's great is that, we get our school, I think earlier in the conversation, Andy, you were mentioning, you can power through in a few hours. You've got your productive day still ahead of you. I mean, more of it, right. I should say. So for the kids, like Kira, she's been winning piano contests, but she's been practicing 1 hour to 2 hours a day. She's taken up clarinet now. She wants to join the high school band as a homeschool, sitting in with the band. Jack is now doing wood shop, and he's started in on some stuff with that. He's building things. I mean, everybody's got their, and what's great about homeschooling is they can kind of find what they're interested in, and then there's more freedom to really start pursuing that.
Right.
And it doesn't mean they don't get a rigorous education, because Melanie's kids are learning science from me. And if they're learning from me, they're getting a rigorous education. You can believe that. I bet they know more about some things than a lot of American teachers out there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. And again, to praise Maria Montessori, that was part of her idea. In the morning, the kids will get basic cognitive skills, and then in the afternoon, they could choose what they want to do. Cognitively, they have to do something educational. But for me, it would have been great, because I'm a humanities guy, and if I'd been able to go to a Montessori school as a kid rather than a government school, I'd have spent the afternoons, reading literature. Other kids would have studied math, other kids would have studied science, other kids would have studied history. But I would have been literature and history. Those have been, the humanities things that fascinate me. And I would have had the afternoon at Montessori school to study, after basic cognitive skills in the morning, to study the fields that I loved in the afternoon. And I think it's a great approach. And then you're done at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There's little homework. You may have to, read the books for the literature class that'll be due in a couple of weeks. But other than that, you just go play, and it's very motivating. It's like even today, it's the summer. I'm not teaching. I get up in the morning. I'm working on several books. I'll spend the morning and the early afternoon working on my books, and by mid-afternoon, I'm going to knock off. I put in 5 or 6 hours. I'm going to work. I'm going to knock off. I'm going to go get out to eat, go get lunch, and I'm going to go to a movie, and go see the Avengers, or something, and I'm going to play, and it's motivating, even as an adult, and it certainly is for a child, put in all this time studying, working, cranking, and then I'm going to have the rest of the day to do whatever I want.
That's great.
Cool.
Wonderful.
So,
well, it's been great being on the Mel and Mike show. Thanks very much, and I hope you invite me back. This has been really good fun.
Good, yeah, because we've got a lot more to discuss. We just discussed evidence for some problems. We can discuss more why they're occurring. But good thing is, Melanie, we had some good questions. We had some good discussion about what parents can do and what teachers can do. It's both, hooked on phonics, get some Montessori in there, do what Ben Franklin did, Institute for Excellence in Writing. And then another thing we didn't mention, I thought of, one thing parents could do. You want some excellence in education? Go on outschool.com. Yep. I'm starting to have classes there. The history teacher, Scott Powell, has classes there. I'll put a link to him. I'll put a link to me. I'm new, so I can only have a few classes, but soon I'll be able to list a whole lot more. I've got 5 now, but eventually it'll be 50 or 60 or more. A lot of things, math, science, logic. So there's another opportunity, it's on the internet, live classes with Scott and I. We can arrange something after school or on the weekends. Pardon? What?
That's what I was going to say. I've for the homeschooling part, once the kids get past me, I have farmed it out to you, Michael, for science and philosophy. Scott Powell.
What do you mean by
history.
past you? Once I get past you?
I feel like maybe someone else would do a better job challenging them still, because I maybe don't have quite the same level of expertise as they need now.
So maybe teach them arithmetic for a little while, and then, I can't
do
math. I know it's some, but I can't do it as well as I want them to have, so I'll let someone else teach it, or history.
Like just to say that all 3 kids are at the University of Minnesota in their math department now.
Yeah.
Jack deferred for a year because his maturity's not quite there, but he's definitely accepted into their program, so he could start college algebra next year.
And how old is he?
Oh, that's great.
11. He's 11.
Wow.
11, going to a university and taking math classes. Yes.
Really something.
Good for him. And you know, if people think, well, kids that smart who are doing, you know, college level work when they're that young, well, they must be nerds, you know, everything, and socially undeveloped. Well, that's not necessarily true, and it's certainly not true in the case of Melanie's kids, who are very social, you know, and a lot of fun, to play with, and you know, and they're just good kids who are very smart and have been very well educated, and I know a bunch of kids like that who are homeschooled.
Sure, yeah, lots of kids are out there in the country like that, and they get a bad rap for being homeschooled because it's not fitting into the common mold that everybody thinks there is. So,
and that reminds me, I'll if people want some proof, up in the show notes, I'll put a link to some essays Kira's written, like stuff we've done in science class. Like they can read that.
Yep. She's a good writer already. She's showing lots of writing potential. Andy, you know, being the master writer that you are,
thank you.
Have you read sometime?
Yeah, sure. Kira's a great kid. I'm very happy to read.
Yeah.
And Leo the lion, and you know, I always joke, Kira Q, that got names for them all, and of course Jack the Ripper may not live up to that name.
Call him Jack the Genius.
Yeah, Jack the Giant Killer. But but you know, philosophically, it shows that there's still this kind of uncivilized, primitive, anti-caveman kind of anti-mind bias in Western society, that we still have this idea that if somebody's really smart, they must be, you know, socially unskilled or awkward or physically underdeveloped, and that's just not true. Yeah. You know, that's just not true. That somebody who's really smart and well educated, maybe even a genius, that they can't have, you know, an active social life. They can't play sports or lift weights and be in, you know, run and be in great shape physically. That's just not true. And a lot of these homeschool kids are very well-rounded. Melanie's kids and a whole bunch of others that I know. And, you know, is maybe surprising to some people, but it's certainly not surprising to me.
Yeah, they should look up, since you mentioned that, look up the life of Abraham Lincoln, you know. Little formal education, a lot of homeschooled, educated himself. You know, like whether you like him or not, he was a smart guy. You got to admit that. And
I do like him, and he was very smart.
And one thing I like that you don't hear about as much, if you look into his, like have your kids read his biography or something, he is actually in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. Look it up.
Is that right?
He's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. He was, the records weren't, you know, like rigorously kept back then, but from what people can figure out, I think he was never defeated in a fight.
That's interesting. I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, he was a rail splitter after all, you know, on the frontier. If you're splitting rails all day with an axe, you are going to develop a great deal of bodily strength. And he was like 6'4", lean, and one of these lean, big bone dudes who was physically powerful. So I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised. But he was a brilliant. I got some great Lincoln stories. He was a brilliant, very down to earth brilliance. You know, very practical. Mm-hmm. His genius shined in real practical matters, and you know, and he was a great man. We could debate whether or not, you know, we should have gone to war over secession. We can certainly debate that, but at least the 13th Amendment and the abolition of slavery in this country came out of it.
Yeah, I think he had good character.
But very strong character.
But one time, people might think, oh, he was a lawyer, he was president, so he was weak, he was just a nerd. Well, one time he went to one city, and he had to, I forgot the exact things, but he had to race the fastest runner in one county, box the best boxer in another county, and do something else. And he won all three. Stories. Yeah, he outran the one guy. He beat up the other guy, and then he did something else. In one match, he comes to this town. He gets challenged to a fight. You know, remember Abraham Lincoln? No, this shows how people can have mental and physical prowess. This is so awesome. I'm not advocating fighting, defend yourself, yeah, but I'm not saying go beat other people up. But so it's like entertainment. He goes to this town and he gets challenged to a fight, and so people are going to like meet after work, and they'll chat and drink and bet, and it'll be a social event. And so it's after work, and they go, and then they fight, and Lincoln wins, and he says, "Anybody else want to take me on? You want to take me on? You want to take me on? You want to take me on? Yeah, I'm the buck around here."
It's great. I love these stories. These like American tall tales. It's great stuff.
Or like Isaac Newton. Oh, he's a nerd. He was just a physics guy. Well, the way he got started, like he used to be, I think, like his class, if I understood this correctly, maybe his grade or whatever, they had 5 classes, and he was in the second to the bottom class, like second to the bottom student, and then he was picked on and stuff. But one day, some big kid, I don't know if the kid kicked him in the butt or pushed him or something, and Newton was tired of it. So he went after that guy. The guy was bigger than him, and he got that guy's head, and he shoved it up against the church school wall. Never picked on again. And then he started being more competitive, and then he started upping his grades. So it's like Back to the Future, Same kind of thing. It was real. It's not a fiction story.
That's funny.
But yeah, it's like a lot of stuff out there. Or like Bruce Lee. Well, jocks are stupid. Okay, but some are like, or like the supple leopard, like Kelly Starrett, big guy, bulky, freaking PhD in like biochemist, like I don't know, like I forget what thing is like biomechanics or something, Or Bruce Lee is like reads all this philosophy and everything. And he said,
you're right. This is the principle of mind-body integration.
Yes.
And so
metaphysics.
Make one last point, then I have to go. Even though the Mel and Mike show is so much fun, we could go on all night. But the great basketball player LeBron James, who is a physical specimen, is an absolute physical specimen. Everybody says about LeBron that the team's in the huddle, and he can remember. His memory is so extraordinary. He can remember the exact play that was drawn up in this situation 4 years ago.
Wow.
What player did what arena it was, who the opponent was, what the play was, how it turned out. He's got this unbelievable memory. He's got like every game he's ever played in the NBA is like in his memory bank down to the last detail. His mind is his basketball IQ is so extraordinarily high, and of course that requires having a high IQ period to be able to have that kind of memory. Again, it's an idiotic belief, certainly a mistaken belief, that if somebody is a physical specimen, then they're unintelligent, and if somebody's a genius, then they must be a nerd. And it's the philosophy here is where you could develop the mind or you can develop the body, but you can't develop both, and that's just false.
Yeah,
it's just false.
Good.
Well, listen, guys, this has been great fun. Like I said, anytime you want me back on, just let me know. The Mel and Mike show is great. It's great talking to you guys.
Yeah, so we discussed some problems with American education, so we can do better, some good things about it, some evidence, some metaphysics of that education depends upon, what parents and teachers can do to help out their kids. Any last words, Andy?
I got a lot of that. But I would just say, just to reprise the main point of all the things we could recommend the parents is, again, reading is the basis of all education. And the good news is it's not that hard to teach your kids how to read using phonics. You could do it in a matter of months.
Cool.
And the kids learn that way, that reading's not that hard. It's not the tortuous process that the government schools make it into. And you can have kids, your kids 5, 6, 7, 8 years old reading way above grade level and reading better than some of my college students do. But it's the right. What did we say before? It's the method, not money. It's the method.
Cool. Yeah. So it's accessible to them. It's within their grasp, and it'd be a profound benefit to their students, their children. So do it.
26 letters, 43 or 44 sounds. It's not that hard.
Cool. Good. Thanks.
Not that hard.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you for your
Melanie,
time.
Michael,
We loved it.
the Mel and Mike show is great. I'm gonna put this. Get me the link. I'll put it up. If you let me, I'll put it up on Facebook and let my 5,000 Facebook friends know about you guys.
Sweet.
Right.
Thanks.
Great.
We'll let you know as soon as I get it done. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks. Soon. Take care.
Guys and girls, take care.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Any last words, Melanie?
I'm good. I just thanks for Andy being on. So that's
Cool.
great.
Yeah. So hopefully, folks, you liked that and found it informative. Remember, we got to look at ourselves, be really critical, do what's best, look at the evidence through history. Look at what is going on in the U.S. now. Look at homeschooling. Think about some of the people in some social media and stuff that started some of that. They call themselves the Montessori Mafia. There's a lot of
that's right, yeah.
Like some of them that started some of that stuff like Google, Facebook, or whatever. They are all like Montessori educated, and the main idea is even if you don't think like how some of what Facebook is doing, but just the creativity, ingenuity that went behind it, and they credit Montessori with that. And you can see maybe they don't have the independence. They don't appreciate that as much as a Montessori tried to instill, but they got some good influences there, and you can see there's like some good things to some of these things like Facebook, even if like some of it isn't the best, or you don't like it, or it could be better, or whatever. But we'll have a lot of links in the show notes. And again, I hope you appreciate this and learned a lot from it. It's a good conversation starter. Agree, disagree, but there's some really valuable information here for us all in the country to talk about and have serious conversation about and not ignore. Like we talked about, not just the way like some education podcasts do. We do some of that, but they'll say, well, how can we like teach this book to this class on this day and then never do it again? We're talking about some of that, some practical things, but what is the nature of education? Why are we doing things the way we are nowadays? What's our nature? Like we talked about last time with Danny. How should human nature inform education? Or as we talked about with Janet Oliver, how should human nature inform education? We've got to look at things holistically. And how, human nature is developmental. It doesn't just occur out of nowhere. So how is this development occurring, and what do we need to do to make our children and students turn out the best they can be and really enjoy life and be healthy?
Because, if you think about it, you really get one chance.
Yeah.
I always looked at it that way with my kids, that I had to take it very seriously, because there's a day where you don't get to go back and redo it.
Yeah.
You can't. So you got to, every moment counts. You got to really, really understand how serious education is. But it's also not that hard, like Andy was saying.
Yeah.
It's not that tough.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to talk with him again about a couple more angles, to kind of figure out, so people can get a little more concrete on what they need to or could do.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Other than get on Outschool and work with Scott and I.
Well, there you go. It's a good plug.
It's a practical thing. It's true. It's
Absolutely. And it's so inexpensive.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's not. I know people think, I could never do it because it's so, you don't have to buy books. Not really that many. You do. We'll get a few. But honestly, you can really get a lot out of everything if you just put your mind to it. It doesn't take that much work.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm here. If anybody wants to ask me questions, if they want to contact me, I'm here. Feel free. I've helped other people with starting up their homeschools before.
Yeah.
So it's easy. It's not that.
Melanie can help. I can help.
For sure.
As Scott Harris said, he can help. He does consulting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so
Great.
and so there's some important things in the podcast we talked about. As we say, you're not going to find it anywhere else. Some practical suggestions, some fundamental ideas, things that we really need to think about. Really do fundamental things to change the direction of, or the discussion, change what we're talking about. And as we say, if you like the show, send it to other parents, share it with them, share it with the homeschool group, share it with a teacher or a principal, a school district. A lot of this stuff would be really beneficial. Private schools, public schools. And then if you could donate, I'm not Bill Gates. Melanie, are you like a female Bill Gates?
I'm not Melinda Gates.
Right. So, if people want to donate, contribute on Patreon or PayPal, we got a link in the show notes. Help get better equipment to better quality recordings, better sound equipment, market the show more, get it spread, have, maybe show notes, like more show notes or more detailed or whatever. Then, if you want to help, that help us, help you, help the culture, help your kids, be very beneficial for us individually and the whole society. So, we'd appreciate that, and other people would appreciate that too. I'm a starving artist. Melanie's a starving artist, so we're not the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation doing any money.
We're the apparently Mike and Mel Foundation.
Yeah. And as we say, like, this episode took 2 hours. It took us a few hours to prepare for it, and it's going to take more hours to get the show notes together and edit this episode a little bit and post it and all that. So it takes a lot of time as well. And so, donating to help us out on the time, or giving us kudos on that, or buying us some coffee or something, or a watermelon or a burger.
or even just a thumbs up, a like,
Yeah.
Give it, do that, because it does count, and it encourages us, of course, and it gives us some reason to keep going too. That there's people out there that appreciate it.
Yeah. So give thumbs up on the podcast app, leave a good rational recommendation. It'd all be appreciated and would help, make this go further.
Yeah.
So cool. But all right. So thanks again for listening, folks. Hope you enjoyed the episode, as we say, and we have more great stuff coming, more lined up, maybe even this week. We'll see. All right. So thanks, Melanie, and thank y'all, folks. Bye.